So this Rey costume, specifically Scavenger Rey from the beginning of Force Awakens, took me just under 3 months off and on to complete. I started with a few odd pieces from a pretty basic Rey costume I made with a friend for the premiere of the movie back in 2015, but I pretty much went back and redid everything, excluding the wrist cuff, belt, and base of the staff, which you'll see in a minute. At least for me, it helps with any long-term project to make kind of a draft. Even if it's a stick figure and chicken scratch, which it usually is for me, it still helps you collect your ideas and get a good idea of the big picture. So starting off with the boots, these are roughly a size 8.5, but they fit my sister who wears a size 10 during the photo shoot, so who knows honestly. They go a few inches above the ankle, not quite mid-calf, and I got them from a local thrift store, but it's pretty much a basic design to start with that you can probably find anywhere. This is the outline I was following to cut the boots so I wouldn't mess them up too bad. The front and back are separated by a sort of S shape and then tied back together. First off, I'm painting the panel on the heel brown since Rey's boots have a panel of leather, but I'm not about to stitch actual leather onto these shoes. You can probably tell that I'm wiping away the paint as I go. I just found that blotting the paint and then layering it made the panel actually look like leather, which is a life hack for you, I guess. I used this brown tempera paint, which doesn't even have a brand name, it just kind of showed up, which is pretty crazy. But I'm taking this up the spine, is that the right word? The back of the shoe, where the seam is. Now I'm cutting that S shape into both sides of the shoes. Now since where I cut is exposed, I'm gonna sew up each side of the cut, which is really hard to do with one hand. Okay, now I have both hands, but I'm very overexposed, wow. I cut out a piece of scrap brown fabric into 8 total with both boots, small rectangles. I'd say like 1 inch by 3 or 4 inches, it doesn't have to be exact. I burned the edges so they wouldn't fray on the boot. Then I pinned them in place, 2 on each side with about 2 inches in between. Again, this is all freehand and not perfectly canon to the distance Daisy Ridley's little rectangles probably had. Then I sewed those in place and threaded the shoelace into the rectangles. Now I realized that I never really took a clip explaining how I did that, so I'll just do it now. For each boot I used 1 shoelace. I then cut that shoelace in half, threaded the first one through the top rectangles from bottom to top, and then tied them in the middle. Same with the bottom 2 rectangles, but I threaded them from top to bottom and then tied them as well. Here's another view of the laces. And here's the finished product. I found the pants on Amazon through a Rebel Legion thread that recommended them. I believe I ordered a large in light gray and it was $11.99. I'll link those in the description for anyone that might be interested in some light gray harem pants. I won't judge. By the way, I ended up having to double cuff these at the knees since they were just a bit too long. But I didn't really have to do much else to these, just a little bit of weathering and pretty much the final product. The shirt I also ordered off Amazon in a large soft cream for $5.94, but it ended up being too bright and it was a weird fit, so I used an off-white t-shirt that I already owned. I think it was from Old Navy? But I'm leaving the Amazon link in here anyway because you can probably find something similar. I cut the neckline and sleeves and weathered the shirt with instant espresso in a spray bottle. Who knew, right? And it smelled delightful. I actually had a difficult time finding the right wrap fabric. I have a limited selection of fabric stores where I live, but I even drove an hour away to Joann's and couldn't find the right gauze-like texture. So I went with this fabric from Walmart, but still didn't really like it. It was a close color match though, so I went with it. I cut it into 3 pieces, each 11 inches wide. The length will vary person by person. You just have to drape the fabric until altogether it reaches past your knees just a little bit. Once I had it draped and pinned how I liked it, I sewed the pieces together on end and then ironed down the seams. Then, since I still wasn't satisfied with the texture of the fabric, I decided to pleat the seams on the top of the shoulders to make it fall more layered and have a naturally wrinkled look, I guess. This also prevented the fabric from poking out on the shoulders too much, which is good. The head wrap was made from a muted tan long sleeve shirt that I got from the thrift store. I made the sleeves longer by cutting a panel of the fabric from the shoulder almost down to the wrist and using that as an extension, if that makes any sense. It will leave a hole, but since you twist the sleeves when putting it on, it doesn't even really show. The base of the backpack was purchased on Amazon, but it came with this weird square leather panel on the bottom. For some reason I lost the clip, but I cut that panel off and then used super strong hot glue to press the seam back together. I filled the backpack with foam squares to give it the appearance of being full but not heavy. I then spray painted these bubble bottles from Walmart for the bottles attached to the backpack. I used some leather scraps laying around for the straps that hold the bottles in place. I just had to paint them brown and then glue them in place as well. These little metal pieces were laying around in my garage. Sorry, Dad, I hope they weren't important. So I used them for the accents on the buckle and the side of the backpack. Also one for the hip bag, which I'll get to later. I used straps from another backpack to hold them down and then glued those straps in place. The glue was still drying here, but this is what the bottles look like on the backpack. As for her little random shoulder covering thing, I spray painted some leftover leather from the backpack, cut it into a square, and then used this strapping Velcro to keep it in place around the arm. This is the finished backpack. And the shoulder strap is put in place with Velcro, so it's removable. The side bag lives on Rey's belt on her right hip. I actually got really lucky and found a monogrammed pouch from my thrift store that worked perfectly, and just sewed on some more leftover leather on the monogram to loop the belt through. Then I attached that little metal piece I mentioned earlier. The belt is one of the few things from the Rey costume we made back in 2015, but it was pretty much just a medium brown belt cut in half down the left side with Velcro slapped on it. I did weather the sides a little bit and added that tiny piece of fabric that wraps around it in the movie. I just bought some yellow leather work gloves from Walmart, and they held paint really well, so it was easy to weather them. This is my reference picture, but by the end result, I took off a little bit of that green, which was easy to do. This is my pattern for the goggles, and these are the ones that I got off Google, of course. I'll link them in the description. I cut the large pattern out of a piece of foam flooring, but you could use any kind of bendable material that isn't more than like an inch thick. Then I cut out the holes for the lenses and pressed some lenses from cheap dollar store sunglasses in the holes. I used the smaller pattern for the fabric, and then I used black thread to make it appear sewn in like her goggles. Then I painted the foam gray, glued on the fabric, and added the little details with hot glue and materials I found around the house. Fun fact, those little gray ridges on the top are actually rubber bands painted gray. I used another pair of the same shoelaces for the shoes and fed them through those loops tied together in the back. I really wanted to incorporate that little headlight she has in the movie, so I found this tiny flashlight from Kmart, painted it gray, and just smacked it on the side with some hot glue. I'm actually really surprised how sturdy it is just being glued on, but I don't think that thing is ever coming off. I pressed a little bit of blue paint onto the glass of the flashlight since her light is bluish tinted. I know it's extra, but it looks good. My dad made the base of the staff back in 2015 out of some metal mop handles screwed together and spray painted, but it originally had these awkward ends made of smashed light bulbs and plastic bottles. So I remade the ends of the staff with some super random tops of cans and some kind of soap dispenser, I think. The two arm wraps were Ace bandages from Walmart, delicately spray painted gray and weathered with tea. The wrist cuff is another piece that we already had. My dad actually made this, and I wasn't there, so I couldn't explain how, but I'll put somebody else's tutorial in the description. Before weathering, which is my final step, I printed some reference pictures and then pretty much just went to town with everything on this tarp. I used tea, the espresso that I mentioned earlier, some dirt, spray paint, you name it. So as you can tell, this costume is pretty cost effective. I used thrifted items and a ton of stuff just lying around the house. But for the things I did purchase, I'll give you those receipts. The boots were from the thrift store for $6.98. The gloves, Walmart for $9. Side bag from the thrift store for $3.98. Backpack, Amazon, $11.71. The bubble bottles were 95 cents each at Walmart. The arm wraps, $5.82 at Walmart. The goggle light from Kmart for $5.92. The sunglass lenses from the dollar store for $1. The head wrap shirt from the thrift store for $2.99. The pants, Amazon, $11.99. The shirt, Amazon, $5.84. And the wrap fabric, Walmart for $5.94 a yard. And this is the finished costume. I'm really proud with how it turned out. This is hardly my first costume making experience. I'll leave a link to a blog post where I talk about my whole experience with costumes, but this is my first time documenting the process, so it's a little bumpy and probably hard to watch, sorry. But hey, thanks for making it this far. I appreciate it, and I'm impressed. If you feel so inclined, I have an Instagram for this account now, and a blog like I mentioned if you'd rather read these rambles instead of listen to my voice. Oh yeah, and an Etsy. This costume is on sale in my Etsy right now. Go check it out.